for my delay.
It is it is my great pleasure, gentlemen, meeting you there. And maybe, Mr. Professor, you can share with us the words of the Prime Minister of Poland, who gave us a nice letter.
Yeah, the Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, excuse me, Mateusz Morawiecki took, patronage of honorary patronage of that, European Schumann Festival organized by Institute of Schumann Thought. And he is, sending the following letter to us. Dear Sir and Madam, the fourth European Schumann Festival that begins in a unique celebration of European integration. It is time to celebrate the 16th anniversary of Poland's presence in the European Union. It is also a time of talks on the future of the community and the role of our homeland in shaping it. To all organizers and speakers participating in this special event, I would like to express my respect and assurance of my memory. Today, we recall the wonderful figure of the father of United Europe, Robert Schuman. It was on this day, 9th of May, 17 years ago, that a declaration named after him was announced. He called for the construction of community of European nations based on the Christian and democratic values. This great visionary and politician knew that European politics should not conflict with patriotic ideas, that you can build a European community and respect the subjectivity of all its members. This year's anniversary is therefore a unique opportunity to recall this universal message once again. Today, we must also remember that Europe is not only a geographical concept and a great place to live. It is also a great civilization and spiritual heritage. It is our duty to the next generations of Europeans to cultivate these wonderful values. We are responsible for Europe's present and future. I believe that we can build it on agreement and cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, I am convinced that this year's, held in the shadow of pandemic, edition of the Schumann Festival will be unique. I believe that it will be strengthen European solidarity for the community and refer to the ideas on which it has grown. I wish you successful conversation and cordial greetings. Yours faithfully, Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki. So I just, really, Prime Minister is expressing that the edition of this year Schumann Festival will be unique. Yes, it is unique. It is unique, as I, said in my introduction, because, we would be not able uh, because of the pandemic, we would be not able to organize that without the technology, without the MS Microsoft Teams. And I think especially that, panel, which gathers, which basically contact all very high top specialists in the area of technology, uh, will support, uh, that this kind of I mean that the technology is a very important for the basically topic of our panel. So the topic of our panel, generally speaking, or the series of this panels, is the national economy resistant to the basically crisis and the pandemic. And in my opinion, as an economist, in my opinion, the technology is one of the very important pillars. As a proof of that, if we would not have this technology, we would not be able to meet, and we would be not able, meet on that panel, meet on the festival, and as well we would be not able to communicate. And we are from some certain point of view, this is of course the pandemic is a difficult time, but for the Institute of Human Thought, this pandemic time delivered a chance, to organize a festival over 1 month. So we meet every week, Sunday and Saturday. So every week we have a few panels, and we have a chance, to contact, to communicate uh, together thousands of people. For instance, last weekend we had on our panels, because of a transmission of that meening to the YouTube, to the different websites, we had altogether around a few thousand viewers and listeners. And we never had that chance, in the past when we organized just a one-day meeting, Schumann Festival, in some place in Warsaw. So we, all together, I assume that all people who will be present on the panels over that basically a month up to a 7th of June, altogether can be up to something like a 20,000 or something like that, or even more. So this is what the technology makes, right? This is this is the result of the and the value added of the technology. So thank you very much for my part of this introduction and the speech, and just go ahead with your plan, Mariusz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Professor, for sharing with us the words of Prime Minister of Poland.
Przepraszam, Mariusz, przycisz troszeczkę swoje głośniki, bo się sprzęga i bardzo źle cię słychać. Przepraszam, ale no, to dla naszej wygody.
Better?
A powiedz coś więcej.
Better now?
Tak, dobrze teraz.
Good. And the topic of our session today is the power of technology. We will discuss and try to find out how to make Polish economy resistant against every COVID, other pandemics, and the emergency situations through the power of technology. It's my pleasure to welcome at the panel active people. They are skilled not only to be worried about the future, but they're willing to shape it. Welcome everybody oriented on results and not only on chatting and talking. Because of the significance of this problem for the well-being of Polish nation, we have a broad audience in Poland and abroad. It's my pleasure and privilege to welcome members of Polish European Parliament, excellencies, ambassadors, prominent representatives of Polish noble families, Czartoryski, Zamoyski, Mycielski, rectors and professors of universities, priests and nuns, officers of Polish army, police, presidents of companies, organizations. I'm proud to have you all, ladies and gentlemen, here. The background topic of our panel is innovation. The nature of the innovation is interdisciplinary and international. They are natural development, natural environment between or even among disciplines. At the place, I want to express my gratitude to all my panelists together and each of you. Thank you for your acceptation of my invitation. I am pleased for your time devoted to the great work of Robert Schuman. In Schuman thoughts are included spirit and reality, and they make the proper base, even the breeding ground, for considerations how to turn human thoughts and ideas into reality. It means into product and systems. And those systems and products, they must be able to be verified on the market. It is the most important thing, because we are producing so much ideas, they are devoted to the shelf. It is not a good way. Therefore, our panel is interdisciplinary and structured according to the line of added value. We start at the bottom line, which is science. Then we go over applied science, startup, market conditions, up to the production or application at the companies. You remember the sentence of Elliot Ness, facing serious investigation challenge: follow the money. And in our case, we want to not follow the money, but we want to follow the added value line. With the help of our panelists, we want to trace the answer to the problem. Why, having so many skilled, creative, brilliant students, we have so little world-known brands? Why Polish students I met in California are the most prestigious events, competition events, don't build their companies in Poland and seek their future in abroad? Why in Poland we have so many self-satisfied representatives of bureaucracy and universities and almost no results? We want, with the presentation of our we want with the presentation, we want start with the presentation of our honored guest, Professor Tadeusz Kochański, who is an active member of MIT Alumni Association. And what it is easy comparable with the world economy. The members of this association, they manage the asset equal to the 7 big economy of the world. They are really excellent and brilliant people, and they have a brain power. Professor Kochański is a specialist. He's nuclear and physics scientist, founder of sensor signals systems. He radar propagation. At the radar propagation, he had been working at MIT Lincoln Laboratory, and was involved in research of cosmic rays and muons. Mr. Professor Kochański, the virtual space is yours.
Dziękuję bardzo, Marius. Am I on screen? Okay. Screen is supposed to be shared. Waiting for something to happen. Sharing screen. Is my screen being shared?
No, not yet. Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Ah. Now my screen is being shared. No?
Yes, yes, you are on the right track.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, now it's okay.
Yeah. Okay. So as Marius introduced things, we are talking about the power of technology and in particular issues of global trust and dependability in the pandemic age. This talk has a number of different routes connecting to it, one of which was part of yesterday and a virtual conference that was hosted in Ukraine that was all about dependability. And so I said, well, this forms a key element of what we're talking about because we depend on these systems and we need to know whether we can trust our systems. In honor of Monsieur Schumann, I have a hat I acquired when I was a delegate at a European Commission workshop related to weapons of mass destruction technology. I don't know if people can see this or not, but it has a little circle of the European stars on it there. So, and in the United States, we have an expression wearing more than one hat. Wearing more than one hat. So I also have the hat from MIT, and then I have the hat from the IEEE, the world's largest technology organization, which has a fine section, Poland section, which is very active also, along with the Boston section, which I've been involved with. So I will take those hats off now. So we're indoors and begin. Okay, so what we're going to talk about for the next 20 minutes or so is how all these issues come together in context of what is part of the Western heritage. And of course, the Western heritage has been transplanted into places like Japan and Korea, where they have become very good at doing things like that we taught them how to do. And we have some inherent weaknesses also, unfortunately, that is part of our freedom that we have because it tends to make us vulnerable to certain things. The key principles, we'll talk about that. And then we'll start talking a little bit about technology. And as I said, technology to the rescue with a question mark. Why the question mark? Well, because of the issue that has to be addressed. Are we the masters or the servants of technology? There are various viewpoints, and we saw some of that today with the problems we have with getting to use a very easy to use supposedly tool. And then we'll finally get to the point where we'll talk a little bit about how Poland can essentially be a model for the West moving forward in this new era after the virus is over. So as I said, we'll talk a little bit about issues, strengths, weaknesses, and principles first. Okay, so we have a global ethos now, and the global ethos has sort of become almost a pagan religion of Gaiaism, which is connected with the ancient Greek mother god of the earth, Gaia. This is a depiction of her by the German painter Feuerbach in 1875. The Greeks didn't quite have her look like that, but the Germans like their Rubenesque, as they would say. So in any event, Gaiaism has sort of gotten the idea that we are to be not just stewards of the earth, as our Christian heritage teaches us. In fact, our Judeo-Christian heritage teaches us, but we are to be servants of the earth. So it is really a retreat towards paganism instead of the tradition of being masters and responsible stewards. So one of the things that has driven a lot of this is what I call systemic failure as a collective guilt. We have problems every once in a while that pop up, and some of those problems are due to our actions and inactions, but some of them are just natural phenomena that we have nothing to do with at all. And we should be able to make the distinction between those which we have a direct responsibility for the problem. We may have a responsibility for the solution, because without solving the problem, for instance, with a pandemic, without solving the pandemic problem, we may have a very less than favorable lifestyle in the future. But we're not, as far as we know, responsible for it. We are responsible for how it's spread, of course, because of the ability of our transportation systems to deliver a virus-infected person to any point on the planet within a day. Now, there may be some constraints. Right. So why are we in this position? To a certain extent, it's all about what I say is connected with this new priesthood and religion, which is modeling and modelers. We believe now that models should tell us the future. Of course, we have examples of models designed by some of the best modelers, running on some of the best computers in the world, and producing the well-known spaghetti plot that's used with the sort of humor on the part of the weather people whenever there's a hurricane. There's actually the first Atlantic storm was named this morning. Its name is Arthur, I believe. And we don't have a spaghetti plot for him yet, but I'm sure there will be one in the next few hours. Several different models starting at the same point with the same initial data, but coming up with different answers as to where he's going. The other problem is, is the belief that we can't think for ourselves anymore, which is supported by this idea of influencers as molders of public consensus. And social networks have been a driving force to make this a key element of our modern existence. We have people who make money, literally, not from selling things other than selling your eyeballs. Young kids, even, they're 18 and 19-year-old, mostly young ladies, who are making several $1 million just by telling people what they're looking at. Excuse me. These networks, the social networks in particular, and their management are a new feature, new issue that we have to address. Who's managing the networks and on what basis? And networks now who are acting as our go-between between events and phenomena and how they're depicted by virtue of the fact that the networks, these social networks, limit certain things that they don't agree with. Is that proper? Is that an issue? So here's an example of what is a sort of an unintended consequence of the coronavirus. This is NASA satellite that is monitoring ozone and other gaseous constituents that are basically not a natural constituent for the most part. This is nitrogen dioxide, and the intensity of the color here, it has to do with the concentration of it. This is an average over the period of time from 2015 to 2019, just to cover up the fact that there's some weather-related things going on and stuff that affect the transport of it. And this is the same area, slightly truncated fit on the page, showing the effect of the apparently the decrease in traffic, possibly decrease in power consumption and things like that. Because whenever you burn something in the atmosphere, you make nitrogen dioxide. About 30% lower on average over this, what's called the I-95 corridor, which goes from Boston to Washington, D.C. As I mentioned, that we've to thank Aristotle for coming up with a basic way of analyzing much of what we do. And one of the things he studied was rhetoric, how people speak and convince people. He ranked these things, and he basically said, well, you can appeal to the emotion of somebody, and that's what he called pathos. You can appeal on the basis of the credibility of the character or the character of the speaker. And we have this sort of as the influencer thing to some extent, or you can actually appeal to people through logic. And he valued this most highly, but it's not typically the case. Most of our politicians and most of our influencers are not using logic. And indeed, most of our sort of pseudoscience is not using logic either. So what about the strengths? We've seen some issues. Now about the strengths. We have foundation principles that we stand on, and we'll talk about a couple of those. One of the keys that made us successful, and as Marius pointed out, MIT, founded in 1861, has founded so many companies that if you took the value of all these corporations founded by MIT graduates, or in some cases MIT faculty members, you would have an economy equivalent to about the 7th largest economy in the world. It would be a G7 country. And why is this? Because of this logo here. On one hand, you have the traditional scholar, which Europe was extremely good at. On the other hand, you had the traditional apprentice program. In Germany, in the 19th century, the chemistry in the science labs was becoming so successful producing real things. Companies like Bayer, for instance, BASF. These companies were growing so fast they needed a supply of workers. So the Germans created the idea of merging chemistry from the chemistry lab with training of people to work in the chemistry factories. William Barton Rogers, who was the founder of MIT, was impressed with this idea, but he said it didn't really go far enough. And he came up with this idea that he called mens et manus, which means the head and the hands. And this logo, which has been updated slightly so that this person who used to be a male person is now a clearly female sort of person, otherwise unchanged. The scholar is still got the beard, still a male scholar, but in any event, there are plenty of female scholars as well. And the idea is that if you take the laboratory, you take the theory from the classroom, and you take it and combine it in a practical sense, you can produce people who have the ability to take ideas from the conception and bring them all the way to the realization. And this has really driven what is now the MIT enterprise of MIT and Kendall Square, the several square kilometers behind MIT. And this has been so successful that the Germans have taken it back. So Karl Ruge has created the Karl Ruge, or KIT, Institute of Technology, on the basis of the MIT model. The other thing that's a very strong part of the West, of course, is the diversity of thought. So we have in the United States, for instance, as was said by a great European who came to the United States to observe us in the 1800s, and that was Alexis de Tocqueville. And he called the different states laboratories of democracy. In the case of the European Union, we have a sort of an attempt of the same concept. The states are a little older and somewhat more fixed in their ways and such, but they provide options to try different things out. And finally, we adopted during the Enlightenment technology, not magic, as a problem-solving tool. We went away from alchemy to actually science and technology. These are our strengths. The weaknesses, we have problems with communication sometimes. Sometimes it's intentional. People obfuscate things. We have a problem with bureaucracy as a permanent existence rather than the elected representatives. Sometimes the people who are making all the rules that we have to live by are not elected. They go from administration to administration, from party to party, and they sit there all the time. We can thank really Le Roi Soleil for the creation of the idea that there was a permanent bureaucracy. Indeed, the foundation of that was the idea of training bureaucrats in France. We have non-governmental major players. Some of these are foundations that have enormous amounts of money. Some of these are universities that have enormous amounts of money. Some of these are corporations that have enormous amounts of money. And they can all act somewhat independently of their elected representatives, again, in the governments. And finally, despite the fact that we are more and more dependent on science and technology, we have a pervasive scientific illiteracy. And indeed, we're sort of unraveling the basic strength of technology, not magic as a problem-solving tool. Magic and paganism type things is coming back. Some of it is, of course, the fact that the science is, as Arthur C. Clarke noted, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Indeed, if you were to try to explain how an integrated circuit is made, perhaps 1/10 of 1% of the people on the planet could understand it at this time. Back to the coronavirus and science, not magic. This is the nitrogen dioxide measurements in Kendall Square in Boston as a function of the time of day. That's in hours from midnight. This is the morning peak from the rush hour. This is the evening peak from rush hour. Now you'll notice that February 24th through March 22nd averaged over 3 years, had some variability, but basically you ended up with a strong peak in the morning and a lesser peak in the evening because it's more distributed. These are still here on this plot, but this is after the virus in April 10th. This is the data from April 10th. This is a visual manifestation of it. These aren't quite the same view, but they're representative. So we talked a little bit about this idea. How successful is the idea? Well, the idea came in 2 flavors. The first flavor of it was Route 128, which was built along as a beltway around Boston in the, this one, in the immediate post-World War II period, though the planning began in the 1920s. The Depression and World War II prevented it from being exercised. Later, they built a second beltway around Boston and then part of a third one because of the success of Route 128. And Route 128 basically pioneered the idea of industrial parks, or industrial estates, as they're typically called in England and Europe. On this similar map, I've noted a couple of things. This is MIT Lincoln Laboratory. This was founded as a technology laboratory to solve a specific problem. The problem was that the Soviet Union had gotten the bomb, and they had airplanes that could deliver it. So this was the creation of this laboratory, was to take technology that had been developed during World War II, such as this cavity magnetron, that was developed in this location here in Waltham, Massachusetts, and make a distributed network that could sense all the way across the US and Canadian border and along the eastern seaboard and detect bombers and vector fighters. This was all done by a test, proven by a test, that a radar was located over here, another radar was located on Cape Cod, and the signals were sent over a telephone line to this computer that was located here in Cambridge, Project Whirlwind, and you'll see it has an IEEE, IEEE milestone associated with it. This was the first real-time computer. This is a location of a microwave conference that was held in Boston about every 10 years. It happened to be this year, last year it was held. The location was right over here in the so-called Seaport Innovation District. A few other things on this map. That's Harvard over there. This is Kendall Square. That's MIT. This is Mass General Hospital. That's the Seaport District. This H thing underneath here is the Harvard Medical School. So a lot of these places are relevant in the context of the modern world, for the virus certainly, and for the biomedical technology. This is a photograph relatively recently of the Kendall Square area. That's the MIT campus going back in that direction. This is Microsoft's so-called New England Engineering Research and Development Center, or Microsoft Nerd sometimes it's called. This is a hole in the ground now. There used to be a parking garage that was built in this generation of these buildings, and it's going to be Google's new complex in Cambridge. This is current Google right over here and over here. This is Acme, the people who invented the idea of distributing servers to supply the internet. One of the founders of Acme was killed in the 2011, one of the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center. This is a building that's under construction right now for both the Boeing and Apple. It's being built by MIT. This is the Broad Institute. This is a creation of the earlier Whitehead Institute, which was responsible for decoding about 1/3 of the human genome. And as a result, they came up with the idea of medicine that would be targeted to genetics. And it's a connection between Harvard, MIT, and Mass General Hospital. So it's located right here. This is sometimes called the most innovative intersection in the world. This is the Koch Institute for Integrated Cancer Studies. This is the McGovern Brain Sciences Institute. This is, as I said, Acme over here, the Broad Institute, the Whitehead Institute. That's Draper Laboratory. It's kind of a stretched out intersection. That's Schlumberger over there. This is a raw material for another project in the future. This is the Volpe Center. Was built here originally as a NASA Electronics Research Center, and then the money was taken away, and can argue about how that happened. But this money is now coming back in a sense. So all this land here and here is going to be converted into a new Volpe Center for the government over here, and MIT will develop this whole area here in the middle of Kendall Square. There's some pictures I took relatively recently in the neighborhood. This is a building that's going to be torn down. It's was the site of the MIT cyclotron during the World War II era. It's going to be the home for the new College of Computing that's going to be built on this site for MIT. Directly across the street from it is the Stata Center, which is the current home for the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. This is part of the McGovern Brain Sciences Institute over there. This is the building that Apple and Boeing will occupy, along with Capital Bank, which is also putting an R&D facility in there. That's Tech Square that was built by MIT originally. It was the home of Polaroid and Project Mac, which was one of the beginnings of the ARPANET, and in fact was one of the terminals that existed when there were only 4. was right there, and another one in Stanford in the other side of the country. Kendall Square, 66,000 people live, work, and learn in Kendall Square, they say, every day. There is 13 of the top 20 global pharmaceutical companies are located there. 30 different industrial sectors are represented. And the top 3 words that they say on Google search: innovative, energetic, and collaborative. That's part of the prescription for Poland. This is what it looked like after they'd finished tearing down the industry that was there. This is what it looks like relatively recently. That's the city of Boston, downtown in the background. So how did we get started? Well, a lot of this stuff started with the first transistor. That's the first transistor and the first Nobel Prize associated with what we would call modern technology, 1948. So in one human lifetime, we went from this, which was something in the laboratory, clearly couldn't sell that, though Bell Labs tried to sell something like that had the same kind of structure inside it. They made several thousand of those things. One of the inventors, 3 inventors, Bardeen, Rattan, and Shockley. Shockley called it a magnificent Christmas present when they announced it to the laboratory on December 23rd. And later somebody named it a transistor. They didn't have a name for it. They called it a 3-terminal semiconductor device. And somebody noted it may have far-reaching consequences in electronics and electrical communications. That's one of the understatements. In the middle of the transistor history, along came the integrated circuit. That was the second Nobel Prize. Jack Kilby at Texas Instruments and Bob Noyce at what became Intel. It was at that time Fairchild Semiconductor, was in fact a direct descendant of Shockley. That led to this first large-scale use of a commercial integrated circuit in the Apollo guidance computer, which we celebrated the anniversary of Apollo 11 last year. We celebrated just a couple of weeks ago the successful recovery of Apollo 13. Neither of those things would have been possible without the Apollo guidance computer. It was also the first real use of a commercial integrated circuit. And it led to the Apollo guidance computer's success, which was really the first portable computer. You can think of it as a laptop of the 1960s. Weighed 70 pounds. Also pioneered software as engineering, as opposed to just a hobby. This lady over here, Margaret Hamilton, basically is standing by the software that she was responsible for writing. These are the big blocks of stuff which were put together in the form of wire rope memory, and so you couldn't change it. Luckily, they actually had one piece of it left over from an earlier test, and that earlier test was this flight over here. This was Apollo 8, where they flew to the moon, but it didn't land. So when Apollo 13 came along, that piece of software was still there, and they could activate it and use it for the trajectory that was necessary to bring Apollo back without landing. This is how Margaret was recognized by President Obama. She got the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's the highest civilian medal you can get in the United States. That was just 4 years ago. MIT holds a conference for the Microsystems Center, which is now becoming the Microsystems and Nanosystems Center. And in 2020, this year, just before the pandemic came along, this was the front cover of it. And the front cover is part of this, which is a silicon wafer. And on that silicon wafer is encoded the 300,000 plus names of all the people who have been connected with MIT since its inception. And in the midst of that thing, right up here, right there, you can see that a bit here, is Tadeusz Paweł Kochański, or that is Paul Kochański. My two brothers are also in here. One is over here and the other one's over there somewhere. This is the first group of students who came out of a class that taught undergraduates how to make things at the nanoscale. And they're real happy celebrating a project there. It's up there. Same technology fabrication facility has created now what's called a cryptographic tag of everything. This is a battery-free ID chip. And in the context of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development estimates $2 trillion, that's US trillion, worth of counterfeit goods will be sold worldwide in 2020. This thing could prevent that. It's very small. It should cost almost nothing. This is a sesame seed right there. And that's the chip right next to it. It's powered by light falling on it. And it uses terahertz radiation, which is radiation that's radio waves, but they're so short that they almost behave like light. They're just outside the infrared part of the spectrum. And on the other end of the spectrum from that first transistor, this is 1.2 trillion US trillion transistors. The largest chip, in a sense. It's a wafer, whole wafer would be out here somewhere. If you inscribe a square, as was taught to us by Euclid, inside of a circle, that is the largest thing you can put inside a circle that's a regular solid. And it takes up most of the area of the circle, and it's got 1.2 trillion transistors on it. Or if you think of cores nowadays, people have multiple cores, maybe 4 or 8 or even 16 cores in a desktop or a laptop computer. This has 400,000 cores. The total area of this thing is 46,000 square millimeters. So there's you can think of it as basically 10 cores per square millimeter. But Moore's law drove that, and it's almost at the end of traditional Moore's law. This is a actual wafer that on this wafer are microprocessor built from nanotubes. So carbon nanotubes, which are much, much smaller than a traditional transistor, can be made into complementary metal oxide semiconductor transistors. And this is one of these is there, and the nanotube array is right here. And it works. It's not very high performance right now or anything like that. And of course, the other story that made the coronavirus able to move from one part of the world to the other is, of course, speed of communications of people and things. This, of course, is not represented in the commercial world. This is the fastest plane ever built so far, even though it's 50 plus years old. And it flew in its last official flight, any event, from Palmdale in California to Washington Dulles Airport in a little over an hour. So these things will come back. We will see supersonic transports or hypersonic transports. Now, for the question that was posed by Marius, and which obviously interests some of the economists and planners and things, this is a study that was done by some people from the MIT Sloan School, which is the management school at MIT. And what they did was they made a map, and they estimated the potential of companies that are powered by the people from these different districts based on the past history of the people living in these districts. So the highest potential comes from Cambridge. There might be a bias around there. There's also basically a strong link with this area of Route 128. And this is the area right around Lincoln Laboratory. That's Lincoln Laboratory right over there. This is the lake. You can see that it's comparable with Cambridge in terms of its power for innovation. This has also been done by the same group for Silicon Valley. And it uses, again, the data from existing companies to predict the future, good companies in the future. Harvard Medical School is over here, and it's one of the hot spots of innovation. It's that little blob right there. So we've seen how transistors went from 1 to 10 US sextillion, or 1 times 10 to the 22nd transistors in a human lifetime. Just a little beyond my human lifetime, but there are certainly people alive who could just at least remember the transistor when they were a little kid. We've seen how we went from, in my human lifetime, essentially from a telegram to streaming HD video delivered to a cell phone in a moving car. That's right on the fringe of the so-called 5G communications networks. And we've talked about shipping and people and things around the world in weeks to hours. Went from weeks to hours, coast to coast, in 1 hour, maybe around the world in a few hours in a couple of years. Some consequences, of course, that we've faced from this is terrorists can get things around the world. They can share information about how to do bad things around the world. Pandemics can spread around the world, but good ideas can also spread around the world, both in terms of physical things and also just the concepts. So the question they're faced with technology is it a big helper, or is it a big danger, or is it both? And we have some examples. I won't go into all of them, but basically it can be both. So it's enabling. It gives us power to do things that we cannot do with our own hands or our own eyes, or today even our own brains in a certain way. Not saying that our AI is comparable to human intellect. It isn't, but it can certainly solve certain kinds of problems very, very efficiently, such as playing chess or Go or something like that. It's purpose-built to do that, of course. There's a risky dependence on depending on technology. Apollo 13 shows us that they wouldn't have come back if it wasn't for people going back to using their heads, their duct tape, and personal experience to solve some of the problems, like the problem of the oxygen, classic case of the so-called square peg in a round hole, literally the absorber for the carbon dioxide in the command module and the absorber for the carbon dioxide in the lunar module. One was square and the other was round. Can you do that on purpose? And no, you can't. They just had to do that. So one of these kind of ways to view this thing is not necessarily friend or foe, but master or servant. And Michael Dertouzos, who was the founder of the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory at MIT, and is often considered the first humanist technologist in a sense, certainly since the days of Leonardo or something. He basically said 300 years ago, we broke the connection between humanist viewpoints of things and technology and science, and maybe we should put it back together again. He wrote a book just before he passed away, The Unfinished Revolution. So what happens when technology fails us? Yesterday, I had a whole bunch of examples, and then if we had had time today, we would have looked at a couple of these. Obviously, power outages are very popular things to be analyzed, and examples of technology failures. Sometimes it's a failure of a component. Sometimes it's a failure to trim tree branches back. And sometimes it's a misuse of existing technology by people trying to do something. Chernobyl is an example, for instance, where they were trying to test something and they should have known that this particular type of reactor, that type of a test, was very risky. So now, what do we do now that we have potentially 1 trillion transistors and the Library of Congress in your back pocket? Essentially a 5G mobile phone, and won't really have 1 trillion transistors, but it has probably in the vicinity of 400 billion transistors. Here's Dertusos. That's a great photo of him. He was always very enthusiastic about humanity and always very friendly and considerate with people who had no idea what he was talking about to try to explain what he was talking about. But his whole idea was about human-centered computers and what they can do for us. And this second version of the book, which was basically, he had very little to do with the changes. The main change was a foreword by Tim Berners-Lee, who was the inventor of the World Wide Web and a friend of Dertusos and a fellow citizen of the town I live in Lexington. He said a few things that Michael probably would have said, but they came along a couple of years later after he passed away. And so they changed this little tagline on the thing a little bit: how to make technology work for us instead of the other way around. So here's an example of a couple of things. This is in Singapore.
That we move slowly to the conclusions.
Okay, so this is in Singapore, and this is a robot that's built in Waltham, Massachusetts, right on the banks of the Charles River in Waltham, by a company which is now owned by a Japanese company, which originally came out of MIT. It's called Boston Dynamics, and this thing is called Spot. It's a sort of dog-like creature, and he's been used by people in Singapore to let people know that they're too close, and that for the coronavirus they need to spread out. If I played this, which I'm not going to do because of a problem with technology, that's the reason why you see it the way you do. Once you launch it, you can't turn it off inside of PowerPoint. So I'll pass on that. So this is graphene being made into a two-layer device. Graphene is a one layer of atoms of carbon. If you want to make some graphene, you can do this very easily. You simply take a pencil like this one. That's a nice IEEE pencil. You sharpen it, that generates a lot of graphene. But if you just take it and rub it on a piece of paper, and then actually take a piece of tape, somewhere I have a piece of tape, oh, it's over there, I can't reach it, and you put the tape onto the scribble that you made on the paper, you can peel off a layer of graphene. And it didn't turn out that people thought it would be that easy. So if you have two layers of graphene and they're kind of misaligned slightly, by changing this alignment, you can go between a high temperature superconductor or an insulator, depending on how this alignment is done. This has not been commercialized yet, but Professor Pablo Arillo Hero, who's originally from Spain, who now works at MIT right on the edge of Kendall Square, is very enthusiastic with it. This is some work that's been done by people with respect to fibers that are sensing things, so you could sense your vital signs and things like that by having these active optical fibers in the fabric. And this is how small it is passing through the head of the needle. So here's a prescription for Poland. Stick with this diversity of thought. Don't get stuck into a demagogic state. Harness the technology. Don't let it be the master. Be aware of global issues. Think and act locally, but use universal tools. The solution is a local solution for most problems. And think about making Poland, in a sense, into a online, if you want, version of the new Library of Alexandria. And finally, what do you do with 1 trillion transistors in the Library of Congress in your pocket? We don't know, and that's the good answer, because that means there's huge opportunity there, huge opportunity. I won't bother to recap. Just throw this quickly through here. I got, what, about 3 minutes left, 2 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. So this is recently founded at MIT jointly with with the Lincoln Laboratory. It's the Center for Quantum Engineering. It's this proof that we've gone from being quantum in the laboratory only to quantum now almost ready for deployment in a practical sense. It's quantum science, of course. I won't go into the details on that. Those are basically distribution functions and stuff. Quantum computing, you've heard of that probably there. IBM is actually sort of selling time on a quantum computer, but it's still marginal. Quantum simulation, when you want to write software like Margaret Hamilton was writing, they always simulated it on a big computer before they were able to put it onto the Apollo guidance computer. Same way, write the software, simulate it on a real traditional computer that behaves like a quantum-like computer. Quantum control, using coherent electronics and optics to control things, some of the young students working with it. And integrating photonics and electronics. So having both the fiber optic type of environment connecting to radios and connecting to electronic devices. This is a chip with both on them. The facility, fabulous facility, $300 million US spent on this facility, not yet fully loaded up with things to do. Opened almost 2 years ago now. And one of the tests was a quantum network. This is Lincoln Laboratory. The other end of it is down in the campus. You can't quite see that. It's off the bottom of this map. But it follows the local roads and things, not the big highways. And it takes 30 some odd kilometers to go that way. But the key is that it's a quantum network as a test bed for quantum things. And training, obviously, one of the things you have to do, mens et manus, back to the German chemistry industry, train people to be able to become quantum engineers, not just quantum engineers, but quantum device manufacturing facility people, quantum equipment repair people, quantum equipment installation people, quantum equipment estimators of the cost of an installation, all those kind of things. The quantum ecosystem, industry, government, and academia. Some examples of some papers from last year's conference up in, they have these conferences up in New Hampshire and Bretton Woods, the home of the International Monetary Fund. And that's it, unless anybody has any questions.
It is my question to our panelists and to audience. Do you have maybe any questions to the presentation of Professor Kochański?
Oh, by the way, dziękuję bardzo for your kind audience.
Thank you very much, Mr. Professor Kochański, for your wide overview, providing us the base for further discussions. At that place, I want to say that we have here, and the co-author of this presentation is Mr. Professor Andrzej Ruciński, who is with us, and I would like to say thank you very much, dear Andrzej, for contribution to the preparation of this presentation. And with us is also a colleague, PhD, Dr. Adam Rogacki, and I want to say him thank you for his support and preparation of the question. Yes, we go to the next point. Mr. Professor Jan Dziuban. He is president of Polish Sensors Association. He is a professor at Technical School of Wrocław. Professor, I met many scientists from the US, and I know from them not from Mr. Professor Juban, that he is highly recognized by those people at MIT. And I met also other people in the field of photonics and electronics in the US, and they know Mr. Professor Jan Juban, and he's recognized by them. And it is my pleasure, Mr. Professor, to invite you, and I hope you will tell us what can we do with this huge potential presented by Professor Kochański. Do we have such potential? How can we release our power of brains, and how can we use it to make our economy stronger? Mr. Professor Juban, dear Janek, please, the floor is yours. I see your microphone is switched. Okay. Hello? Hello, Professor Jan Juban. Hello?
Yes.
Okay. The floor is yours, Mr. Professor.
All right. So do you hear me, sir?
Yes.
That's nice.
Excellent.
So I start again. I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity of presenting of such ideas from the just simple engineer point of view. I, honestly speaking, I'm not enthusiast of the material sciences in nanotechnology. This is the future. At that moment, we need to concentrate on the future businesses which will grow the Polish economy and are, from my point of view, the most important tasks. I'm coming from Wrocław and Wrocław Polytechnica, and I do represent the MEMS guy. Microsystem, MEMS, are integrated mechanofluidic systems. It comes from the microelectronics, but by the extension of function, adding of mechanical function, fluidical functions, we can obtain an integrated system. The first integrated systems, very well-known pressure sensors, appeared as a fully commercialized devices in the 90s, although we have plenty of other first-stage development solutions, mainly physical sensors, which have appeared during the next decades, some of them making revolutionary changes in our life. We know some popular MEMSs in our applications, although usually we cannot recognize them. The microphones for cell phones and for portable devices, the projectors for the home video studies, the gyro for cars and other sensors are MEMSs. The story of the MEMSs, facts on MEMS, show it that in 2002, the single citizen of the United States get used about 3 MEMSs, and in 2020 is about several thousand of MEMS in the pocket and the neighborhood of the regular citizen of the United States. The same goes in Europe, although the tendency is slower, as usually Europe is a bit recessed in comparison to the United States, but the gap is not so large. We expect that in 3 years this will be finished. The classic applications, as it was in 2009, where inkjet heads, filters, pressure sensors, accelerometers, and plenty of the other small instruments hidden in the final products. In 2012, situation started to change because of the wearable electronics. So some parts of the MEMSs increased in 3-7 times. So looking onto the smartphone today, we see that its usability is dictated by MEMS parts hidden inside that very popular electronic device. So we observed the increase in so-called mobile MEMS life cycle when filters, accelerometers, microphones are produced in billions of pieces, and the market only of these parts goes to niche of billions of dollars a year. So we have a consumer MEMS explosion, which increased the market from 10 million units in 2007 to almost 250 billion units in 2023. So we observe a cost reduction for multiply microsystems, the improvements of the infrastructure, especially wireless internet connectivity and the cloud processing. So these factors enable adoption of the MEMS technologies toward the $1 trillion market of the basic MEMS in the approaching 10 years. So we are at the edge, or maybe we are inside the third industrial revolution. It is a fusion of the computing, communication, and sensing, freeing humans for creativeness, and it enabled the MEMS market to catch up with semiconductor market, which is at that moment the hugest market in the high technology. So we have a smart business driving so-called MEMS tornado, cell phones, monitoring systems and devices of the health, smart grid architectures, automotive industry, IT, industrial processes, industrial systems, space industries. So, from the first, this is a new-born smart business. From the second, education must include courses on Dutch microengineering, and what's more, the politics must understand that something new appeared and will create conditions for the approaching 20-25 years. Today we have an internet of the people, tomorrow the social machine networking. Today we have microsystems supplied by wires, tomorrow the self-supplying zero-energetic angel sensors and the microsystems. Today we have about 21 MEMS in person in Europe, and tomorrow it might be at 10,000. So this growth of the MEMS results in a massive creation of jobs. And the problem is, what kind of a strategy should be applied in Poland? Here we have an example of a very highly sophisticated product, an iPhone. Despite the MEMS existing inside, we see that only 3% of the selling price goes to China for assembling. 52 are components, including components produced in Poland, and 66% is the Apple slice. At that moment, we cannot form huge marks with this strong position as Apple has, but we may produce components, but assembling is not for us, in my opinion. So this revolution creates jobs. Most of the jobs will be created in developed nations, mainly in the USA. Plenty of governments of different high technological countries compete to get that jobs. Here we have a list of active administrations. Where is Poland? The total job number worldwide created by the MEMS tornado is counted to be at least at the level of 170 million. What can be done in Poland? In the MEMS technology, in these new businesses, education, creativity, and multidisciplinarity is more important than the heritage and economical assets. This newborn high industry, high technological industry, at that moment has small number of well-established competitors. it needs relatively small starting investments, and it's ideal for small and medium-sized, very flexible enterprises. And what's more, the good market forecasts are able here. What should we develop in Poland? This is, of course, my personal viewing of the situation. I am not economist. I am not a political decision maker. I am just simple professor specializing in the microsystem and related to technologies. The first is a data collecting, but in the real time using the MEMS sensoric nodes. This is the exploding industry I will show later on. The second one is a new medicine, including the point of care instrumentation and the remote controlling and protection of the older society. Extremely important in the time of the invasion of a coronavirus. As our third point is making of the instrumentation and newborn space nano aircraft, mainly for low Earth orbiting, but as well for deep space exploration. Why IoT? Why data collecting using the real-time sensoric nodes? It fits to Polish speciality, has good perspectives, especially in the era of the portable 5G nodes. Functions are wanted by the society. This is a stable and approaching for decades business, $1 trillion niche of market in the next 20 years. Positives, we have good engineers. International and Polish software in Poland are very strong. Well-defined business targets. The common knowledge of the importance of the IoT is well accommodated by nation. They use it. They want to use it. And potential negatives caused by microwave radiation are neglected at that point. What is the most negative feature here? Lack of the Polish microelectronic industry. I thank you very much to Mr. Balcerowicz for killing it, including my own production in Warsaw. So all components, sensors, microprocessor, microsystems, MEMS must be imported. This is a problem. There were several probes to restart the microelectronic industry. The last did just 2 years ago. There was no positive response from the decision makers, although the investments here in the specialized products and production is not very, very high. It's in the term of 100 of the money for anti-pandemic fighting. Example of the jobs of different actions. First of all, we need incredible number of new addresses, one for everything on the earth. We need the swarm internet layers computing and the microsystem collaborating. So Cisco forecast that it might be a $19 trillion American dollars business and about 20% of the global product a year, just here, now, in 2020. The General Electric say, okay, it will be only 15 trillions. Sorry, I made a mistake, not in 2010, but in 2025. And the first multi-billion acquisition of startups has begun, the Nest bought by Google. Hewlett-Packard's social network systems is just approaching, and we should include such projects inside the portfolio of the Polish specialties. Of course, we cannot dictate conditions, but we may consume a part of these new markets. Why medicine? Medicine, including the home care remote systems, is a future of the medicine. In the pandemic time, detection of pathogens and, what is very important, the remote patients controlling, being at home quarantine, may be solved only by the miniaturized solutions based on the microsystem technology. The market is huge. Pandemics will return. This is not the end. World competitors are at the same introductional phase of development as we are. What are positives? Plenty of private companies making software, very well-educated young engineers and biomedical staff. Almost unlimited niches of applications. Positives are that usually developments made by universities and our companies are on very high TRL level, up to 6. So it's easy in comparison to our technologies, including material science, to shift from the universities toward application and reproduction the existing solutions. What are next? A difficult acceptation of news by the medical service and staffs. A problem with the hardware production, some part must be important, and very difficult and costly administration procedures in Poland. Some showcase about microsystems applications. They study the mobile device, including the remote controlling station based on the telephone culture, the very complicated and well-acting computers for measuring of different data, system for remote controlling, for example, and alarm states of the older patients becoming very popular, especially at insurance companies, because it causes risks, it limits risk. Intelligent pills driving through the body and making different measurements. Sensing of the glucose by different sensors, as well as sensing of some say, final products of our body to extend the medical parameters. Sensors, visualizations, measuring, controlling even of the babies, intelligent smart bra, and even the body becoming the computer measuring of the activity by sportsmen. A good example of the state of the art in Poland is the mobile laboratory for the collection of samples and identification of biological threats, financed by the National Center for Research and Investigation, the NCBR, and that solution, if we suspect any diseases or attacks, we drop the laboratory. From that laboratory, the robot moves out and collects samples. Samples are delivered to the set of the portable laboratories, able for very fast detection, about 25 minutes, of at least 52 different viral and bacterial pathogens in the battlefield region. It was presented to the European Defense Agency. It was awarded by the Defender Award, and nobody was in Poland interested in the further on industrialization of the solution. And now we jump to the nano satellites. This is a newborn instrumentation, miniaturized. The controlling of the space at low Earth orbits gives data for governing of the Earth. To govern data controls the world. MEMS microprocessor, smart solar panels, smart picture sensors, mechatronic and software stand behind the expansion of a nanosatellite. The heritage and the economical resources are not critical here. Everything is new. But even today, dozens and thousands of nanosatellites, which are planned or are tirelessly cruising around the world, gives us a great chance. A nanosatellite weighs something like 10 kilos, maybe 10 kilos to 50 kilos. What are positives? Explosive growth of the market, mainly for the observing of the Earth, fits to our capability of realizations. There is open market of electronics and mechatronic components. We have education, good educated people and skilled people, and intelligence of the clarity which dominate. Launching is easy and cheap at open service markets, and this is an ideal investment for small and medium enterprise. What are next? Mainly a post-colonial mentality at different levels observed in my country, and lack of a teleports and the communication dictated by a few players, including the United States. What are nanosatellites? Smart size spacecrafts. Cheap, low power, fast microprocessors, MEMS systems, photovoltaic and array light detector, as I mentioned earlier, enable growing of this business. This is a new tendency in the space exploration, miniaturization, not only for Earth satellites, but as well for deep space exploration. What are we able to build? As an active player in this part of the high technology, together with my industrial colleagues, with the support of the central administration, mainly from the National Center of Research, we create the nanosatellite industry at Lower Silesia. Not only thinking about that, we do it. The first private Polish lower orbit observation cube nanosatellites was launched in April 2019 and works at the orbit. Based on that, we propose a project of the high resolution CubeSats observatories, the constellation of the project is actually being realized with a cost of something like 50 millions of a donation and some 25 of the local resources. We do the new, first in the world, so-called deployable CubeSat to obtain a good resolution about 1 meter at the Earth from the orbit, 350 kilometers. This CubeSat is full of MEMSes for positronics of its mirrors, for stabilization, for communication, for interferometric photonic measurements, etc. In a period of 3 years, first 8 satellites will be launched, but the first, say, unfinished solution just for checking will be launched on December this year. In the period of 6 years, we will launch about 1,000 of the observation satellites to get the 30 minutes repetition of a picturing of the desired fragments. I mean, mainly Poland. The next project we do is something crazy, bio-nano satellites for making experiments in the microgravity, medical, pharma, and chemical. This is one of the newest fashion in the biomedical business, very expensive, because usually such mission costs about 40 up to 50 million of bucks. Our goal is to build a satellite able to make controlled remotely experiments in the microgravity and sending of the data directly into the Earth for the further on processing. This is a new approach. Those are our experiments. We create a new kind of the space medicine, and we will create a new product. I mean the bio-nano satellite with the laboratory on the deck, which will be sent as a product. This is a very complicated MEMS system, which is a synthesis of knowledge in microfluidic lab chips, in microsystem technology, sensoric and photonic, and of course informatic and classical electronic. It is of course built in the Cube Nanosat. It looks like at this picture, and is not finishing our dreams about new kind of the businesses of the industry in Poland. In my opinion, as John Kennedy announced in 60s, flying to moon, and it was the driving force for Americans to establish a cosmic industry, space industry. I think that the Polish mission to Mars may do the same. Maybe a driving force grouping different enterprises and administration entities into one working mechanisms. This will be a 65-kilo space nanocraft. The cost of the preparation and launching is about 120. It fulfills questions. Oh, excuse me, it is in Polish. Oh, copy C, copy V, and you have. But everybody understands. We want to obtain this light of the discoveries of space because it gives plenty of the splendors in science, economy, technology, and politics, not mentioning educational purposes. And the space will give a world-class advertisement for Poland. We follow the methodology presented by GPL in Marco missions. They launched 2 identical aircrafts and get close fly, about 3,500 kilometers from the Earth, for space of the Mars itself. Why not Moon? Because Moon is more difficult than Mars, and Moon does not give these profits we obtain. How will we look our space aircraft, as it is shown here, and what is the state of the realization? Artur Chmielewski, who is at that moment the director of the Mars flight of the Polish mission, visited us in May 2019 and discussed with students, with collaborators, with us, with the small enterprise from Wrocław Shuttle Revolution. Is this possible to create a high technological business in nano satellites? Fortunately, Shuttle Revolution started it in 2016, and today this company has about million, maybe million to 20 million zlotych of the budget to form in 3 years these products. But according to the Artur Chmielewski, we are able to beat such mission to the Mars. So we formed a consortium, 9 best universities, the company Virgin Orbit belonging to the empire of Richard Branson. We have close collaboration with our colleagues from GPL and other universities and institutions in the United States. And we think that we'll do it. I would like especially thank to Janusz Bryzek, the Polish interpreter from the Silicon Valley, who started the MEMS business in the United States and became a billionaire by selling all the sensors. So this is the best reference we may get. And our colleagues involved in the preparing of that lecture. So I would like to conclude the microsystems are amazing and will give jobs for years. The only problem is to jump into that business. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you very much, Janek, for providing us a astute insight into 2 disciplines, into MEMS and small satellites, and showing us challenging opportunities. It is a great chance, and I think that the next panelist could be your future partner for this task to realize. And may I ask you, Tomasz Wierzchowski, who is president of IBC company, which is located in Great Britain and have in mind to get back to Poland, but he needs a little bit adjustments on the Polish market. Tomasz, please excite us about your technology. Please switch your microphone.
Yes, thank you, Mariusz. Thank you. Okay, so let me first share the screen. Hopefully everything should work now. Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much for invitation to join this panel and to be able to speak among such other great panelists. So my name is Tomasz Wierzchowski. I'm just small correction. I'm Chief of Technology at HBC. And today I will be talking about applied technology, specifically about robotics revolution and startups, and what I would recommend, what needs to be improved, and what needs to be done in Poland in order for technology revolution, including robotics, to take off. Yes, so
Tomasz, we don't see your presentation.
Oh, you don't? Okay. Sorry for that. Okay. Can you see the presentation now?
we can see, yes.
Oh, excellent. Perfect. All right. So, so what I'll be talking about today in helicopter level picture. So I'll start with my story, because I think it's relevant about what I'd like to discuss today, where I was educated and where I gained my experience and all of these thoughts I want to share today. Then I want to share actually some great projects in Poland, which I know of, either personally or through other ways, which took off really well globally. Then I would like to talk about this robotics revolution and what are global trends and challenges. And then I would like to move to the specific topic of this panel. So discuss what actually we can accomplish in Poland in terms of technology, specifically robotics, because I believe this is one of the technologies we should invest in. Then how we can benefit from it as a country, and what is needed finally to succeed. So just a little bit about myself. So I was born in Poland. I was educated both in Poland and in United Kingdom. So my background is in robotics and control engineering, where I done Masters of Engineering at Silesian University of Technology, Politechnika Śląska, w Gliwicach. And also I have a degree in autonomous vehicles at Cranfield University in England. So my background is quite interdisciplinary. I had a chance to see firsthand during the same time how research in Poland versus England in this case, so Western world, we can call it that way, is done. What are pros and cons? And like my specific background is actually in control engineering, autonomous vehicles, and drones. So I worked across during my academic time on a drone project at Silesian University of Technology and also at Cranfield University. So that's my academic background, but actually what's most interesting, I think, is my commercial background, because this spans across Europe. So my commercial background is not too much in Poland, it's across European countries, and it's fully focused on robotics innovations. So just 4 examples of projects which are international, and some of them have Polish elements. So the first project I work on in robotics space in my commercial career was in Netherlands with teams in Spain and Poland as well. And that was on commercial drones development. The company was at that time, 2012, a pioneer in commercial drones. So we're a bit of like, let's say, Apple in earlier last century in computer personal computer market. So a lot of exploratory work, but real customers, global customers. Excellent experience and excellent team I met at that time. And that work led me to another exciting project. So Ariatronics was startup and scale up, really rapidly growing. And then I moved to corporate, to one of the giants, Dyson, where I worked for their home robotics group, which was when I joined, they were then just announcing the first product after 16 years of R&D. So it was 16 years of R&D to come up to the first product. And there was many other products in pipeline, and it was pure British company with core R&D in one place. Exciting times, and give me interesting perspective on how also consumer electronics is seeing robotics. Dyson is consumer electronics, white goods company, and yeah, the teams are also global actually in terms of the backgrounds. And then another very interesting project was at Emotech. So this was back startup or scale up, I would say, based in London. However, with very strong Chinese connections. The founders were Chinese, and the company decided to move into a very interesting field, which is social robotics. So they decided to develop a new type of robot, which is your personal assistant, but actually physical, as you can see in here. It is physical robot, and this robot actually, its key technology is not in the hardware, it's in the AI, machine learning. because we're developing a very interesting feature, which was a character engine, which was personality recognition and adaptation to owner's personality. So this was quite groundbreaking technologies in social robotics. And in the end, it led me to my current place, to my current company, ABC, which is in a very exciting agriculture space. And in here, I'm delighted to work with team in Britain. We're based in London, but we are also planning to open an R&D center in Poland, and we also work with Swedish partner. And I'll talk just a bit about it a little bit later. So, so I said I would talk now about what exciting robotic stuff is going on in Poland, because maybe not of the audience knows that there was going on. There's going on some of the exciting projects. It's not like many of them, but there are some unicorns. So the first one I want to talk about is quite recent. It's a company called No Magic AI, and the company, yeah, this is a very unique company. I had a chance to meet the founder and CEO Kacper Nowicki, and so the company is based in Warsaw, and so the company is developing an logistic robotic solution, which is able to pick, place, identify, and inspect on the fly objects in sorting centers, for example, in logistic centers. And this is very difficult robotics task. It's manipulation and perception task, which requires really flexible algorithms, ideally machine learning algorithms, which can actually learn from experience, because the objects you're manipulating, as on this picture, are not objects that you can always program machine to do in advance, because they can be in any orientation, they can have different shapes, and the way how you grasp them is also something to consider. And this company, so it's still a company which is developing technology. They have already a product or demonstrator well developed, but they, for example, attracted top Silicon Valley investors and announced last February. This February, they closed almost $9 million seed round. So now moving to my region, so to Gliwice, so my university hometown. So there's a company called Exotech, which is actually led by my friend from university, Michał Mikulski. And this company is developing, they already have major product in market since a few years, rehabilitation robots, also groundbreaking technology due to the way how they control these robots. So this is something that work which came up from exoskeleton developments of Michał from Sajarze University of Technology, and then it moved into rehabilitation robots, which which are quite interesting in the technology behind them, the way how they sense patient signals, let's put it that way, and the way how they actuate patients' arms in this case, or legs. It's very versatile robot which they are developing. It's very groundbreaking technology and also globally already deployed. And the final example, this is more on the software side or AI, something that probably many of you heard about, but worth, I think, mentioning. This is a project from many years ago, but still active in the world. So it's Iwona software company based in Gdynia, now I think Gdańsk. So this is a company which was developing text-to-speech software, which was supposed to be in the start of the company used in many industries. It was quite successful, and it led in the end to acquisition by Amazon, and now their text-to-speech engine is used across the world in tens of millions or hundreds of millions of devices powered by Alexa. So this is I think this might be even one of the most groundbreaking impact of Polish technology worldwide, if you want to probably count number of devices and users like daily using Alexa. Yeah, and Łukasz Osowski and Michał Kaszczuk were the founders who actually came up with the idea, according to stories publicly available, in still graduating from university. Okay, so we have this great talent, right? So what talent is in Poland actually? So do we actually have advantage? So yes, I think we do. So we have, of course, excellent technical universities, and they have world-class research in selected domains, as my previous speaker give great examples. We also, in terms of education of students, in my opinion, we have advantage in doing a bit different way that Western world, let's say, is doing the education of technical subjects. We have wider technical specializations but still with solid fundamentals, and I think this is important, and this is advantage, and we have also we actually have large volumes of talent graduating compared to Western world. This is absolutely and motivated, talented graduates. I would have to add to it, of course. This is absolutely massive advantage, I think. So what we are experts in terms of this talent, so across domains. So I'll be coming to this in a second, but those are the enabling technologies in robotics, so electronics, mechanical, robotics itself, like algorithmic, software, artificial intelligence, machine learning. And one of the most important, I think, advantages of Polish engineering talent from my experience working in many other European countries, that Polish engineers tend to have much more hands-on experience, but also interdisciplinary experience. And I think expertise, it comes from my hypothesis on that is from the way how we are being educated at Polish universities. That's sometimes it seems that solid fundamentals are not that important, and like also in too many fields it doesn't help. But actually in your career, during robotics work specifically, which is multidisciplinary, but more than this is also more fields are also multidisciplinary, is very important. Okay, and just finishing on talent. So summarizing, yes, so we have a vast engineering talent pool, including also senior engineering. So not only graduates that are very important, but also senior talent is there, and they work at world-class R&D centers in Poland, and they work across many industries. So automotive, aerospace, industrial, telecom, energy, electronics, and some silicon design, software, AI. I prepared this map here just as an example of in this case actually West world, let's say, R&D centers, but each of these centers normally is hundreds of or more than 1,000 engineers working there. So just looking at this map and looking at the names and brands there, we do have strong ecosystem of actively senior engineering talent. So there's no doubt that we do have resources. So now we have these resources. So what is worth working on in the field of robotics, which I think is now coming into revolution or already going through revolution. So first of all, why now? So I will talk about what revolution it will be, but the question is why now? Why these times are interesting? So this comes to my two last speakers' comments, and I will be actually repeating myself. That's interesting. So right now, since last few years, the rapid advances in many very relevant robotics enabling technologies. And the first one is something that my first speaker talked about, is computing, specifically GPUs, FPGAs, and neural network accelerators or intelligence processing units. This is very important because without having enough computing power, robots, or specifically mobile robots, will not be able to perform tasks and to run algorithms and in order to perform the mission. Second one, sensor technology. So that's something what my previous speaker, Dr. Dziuban, Professor Dziuban, talked about, starting with MEMS, IMUs, but also LiDARs, radars, new camera technology, better camera control, also global navigation system technologies. So this is very, very important sensor technologies which enable robots to see and perceive the world. Another one super important is power and battery technology. So if we're talking about mobile robots, they need to have independent power. So 20 years ago, the lithium-ion or lithium polymer batteries didn't exist in commercial world, not in the way how today are. And for example, Dyson, the first Dyson robot vacuum cleaner that was supposed to release 16 years ago or 18 years ago was not released because the power technology was not there. So it was either too heavy or too large, the battery, in order to power it. Wireless communication also very important because mobile robots need to move, so they have to communicate with either user or between themselves or with infrastructure. So without reliable and sufficient communication in terms of latency, bandwidth, robotics doesn't exist as it is in terms of the field. So we have like some very interesting like industry standards and also underlying technologies, including spread spectrum, and standards like Zigbee and technologies 4G, 5G coming in. Consumer electronics, something which Professor Juban mentioned, this is driving a lot of technology. So now mobile smartphones are actually driving the low cost and high performance electronic components, silicon components, and supply chain beyond them. So this is also a very important factor. And now we're coming into more soft technologies, or like, let's say on higher level stack. So artificial intelligence and machine learning, specifically object classification and deep learning. So this is something which is enabling perception of a robot, but also learning how to navigate, for example, or learning some situations that normally you have to program for the robot. And then in the end, final technology, robotics research. So fields of autonomy, localization, including simultaneous localization mapping, control, navigation, smart materials. All of this is actually bringing together these other technologies in order to get something, So with all of these advances, now there are new applications that used to be impossible or even never imagined and are now emerging. And I'd like to talk about them. So I have two examples of technologies that I think are worth mentioning globally. So the first one is autonomous delivery. So this is a very hot topic now. And here I identified three types of deliveries, which are now, I would say, going commercial, or let's say in advanced trial stages. So first one is vital medical supplies, drone delivery. And here's an example of Silicon Valley startup Zipline, which developed an unmanned drone delivery system, which is now operational in Uganda in Africa, and I think one or two other countries. And this is really groundbreaking technology because it's enabling delivery of blood samples, or actually in this case I think it's blood for other reasons, up to 2 kilograms payload over 50 miles radius. And this is done with fixed-wing drone, which is flying over 100 kilometers per hour. So this is really fast delivery on demand, something that in these countries, developing countries, it will be impossible to actually deliver in another way. And the economic cost of these installations, of these technologies, is actually affordable. I mean, it makes it, this technology actually is not just a gimmick or it's like expensive trial. This is like cost viable technology.
So, Tomaszu, we go slowly to conclusions.
Are we? All right. Okay, that's fine. I'll skip the other two deliveries because those are similar technologies, just a bit different type of them. Precision agriculture. This is another, I think, groundbreaking technology. I would just like mention it roughly. This is what I'm working currently at ABC, and this technology can deliver many actually benefits, and this is massive market. I'll play just a very quick video showing one of the potential of this technology. So something we're developing is jumping robots, which are able to scan and weed and spot spray for the large-scale farming. I will not go into too much details into that. This is really amazing technology and something that we believe is the future. And also future, I think, is in robotic harvesting, especially in some very speciality in difficult fields like soft fruit picking. And here's an example of soft picking technology from UK, from startup Doctooth. So what vision can we accomplish? So I think that first of all, on national level, we have to have a set of key technologies and innovations to focus on as a nation. Some can call it innovation think tank, and I think the robotics technologies should be one of them. I think robotics is a bit of a new space and defense. So technology developed during the cycle of development of robotics technologies will pay off in different fields, in consumer electronics, in all aspects of our life, relatively quickly and much higher than the initial investment, of course. And what market applications in Poland might focus on? So I have personal suggestions. I think autonomous delivery of vehicles of goods is something that is well suited for both Polish market and talent we have and disciplines. Autonomous logistics like No Magic AI. We have logistic centers, and also this is technology which relatively with low investments can increase. Its economic benefits are massive. And precision agriculture. I think this specifically with Poland's also background in agriculture and a lot of agricultural machinery manufacturers. Yeah, this is something of interest of the nation. And I think, yeah, the goal of the vision, which we have to, as a nation, we should set is that Polish companies should invent, develop, and have control over groundbreaking technology and products. And that means that we should research and develop key technology and IP, but also not only stop then at that point, but also develop products using this technology and IP through industrialization phase until production and going to market and having control over it, not necessarily manufacturing in Poland, but having control of the process and owning the technology. This is something which will massively pay off, requires capital and focus, but this is the only way to get to state like other technology hubs are doing. And how we can benefit? So few obvious things, of course, Polish businesses will own the technologies. We can manufacture in Poland if we want, not necessarily this is necessary. Polish tech and products have tremendous global and local impact. And we can become actually new emerging high-tech hub and ecosystem in robotics, artificial intelligence, hardware, competing with likes of Zurich, Odense in Denmark, Shenzhen, and Silicon Valley or Boston. And we can attract more global innovation investment and engineering talent. So what is needed to succeed? This is the conclusion I'm going to. So we have to have, first of all, targeted vision and leadership on national level. And this should be guided with industry experts from different perspective, not only local, I think, but also global. There has to be support, really good support on promising entrepreneurs, on revolutionary projects with financing, but not only with that. But financing is the key with technologies like robotics. This can be capital intensive. So if we want to do it, then we have to have sufficient round size for stage and tech scope. So very initial investment like pre-seed, they can be relatively small, but going to seed, Series A, but especially seed, which is a bit of like volley of death for startups. This is crucial. Like this is like several millions of euros or dollars of size, and this is not necessarily with many VCs portfolio like globally. This type of focus in terms of hardware, deep tech, and robotics. We should attract foreign innovation capital, including VCs, and we should not just attract outsourcing or manufacturing capital to Poland. We should have good funding balance, that I was touching on earlier, between just software or software as a service businesses or enterprise software and true innovations like true research, hardware, deep tech, and robotics. Of course, applied, of course, creating products and for markets that exist, which are proven or that will be emerging. But like at the moment, if we just follow an traditional low-risk investment model, or let's say we're investing in software, well, actually, more innovation will happen in the end in hardware, deep tech, and robotics, because software will be at some point not enough to enable even more amazing applications. So, final points. We should also create supportive conditions and ecosystem for setting up and specifically running innovating startups. So running startup in Poland, now we're going to open an office in Poland from ABC. And the more I talk to other founders and how it is run what it takes to run a company in Poland, I don't think it changed too much since I left Poland around 10 years ago, and it's not a good sign. So I think there has to be an ecosystem and a way where entrepreneur doesn't have to worry about running the company in terms of bureaucracy. And final comments. So there has to be collaboration between SMEs, some corporates, if there is a specific strategic partner or customer or some other technology which will be integrated, and academic, and has to be healthy and efficient. That's very important. And finally, so I'm here actually representing not just myself, but many other people like me who actually pursued career abroad after graduating in Poland or maybe even earlier, and they would like to come back at some point. But in order for that, there has to be a way of actually enabling this and showing that it's worth developing brands and products in Poland. And all of other points are, I think, quite key to this. And the very final point, I think that also foreign world-class talent should also not be worried about coming to Poland, developing products there. An great example of this from other disciplines is the gaming industry. CD Projekt now is able to attract really world-class people from all the world to work on their titles. And that's why I'm concluding, and thank you very much for your attention.
Tomasz, thank you very much. You provided us a great vision and interesting vision, and I think because I know you and your colleague, and I know that you have this potential to fulfill your promises. And at that place, I would ask immediately Marcin Hejka, who is top finance manager, who is venture capital Polish top of the top. How can we support such ideas that the young people want to come with the best ideas to Poland? Marcin, please tell us, what should we do? Marcin?
Prosimy o włączenie mikrofonu.
Apologies, I'm on. Mariusz, thank you very much. Let me start with a few words of introduction. I spent 18 years at Intel Corporation. Actually, I was at Intel Capital, investment arm of Intel Corporation, the arm investing in innovative startups globally. Over $20 billion invested in roughly 1,500 startups across the globe. I spent 18 years running Intel Capital in quite significant part of the world. I was member of the Global Investment Committee, vice president and managing director responsible for Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Asia Pacific. So I was pretty much running the world except China and North America, and had 9 offices reporting to me. Number one, a couple of comments. Number one, Central Eastern Europe is incredibly rich in talent. It's a little known fact, but actually Central Eastern Europe was the best performing geography for Intel Capital globally. In terms of financial returns from investments in technology companies, Central Eastern Europe performed better than Israel, better than Silicon Valley, which proves the talent. But there is a couple of things we need to kind of highlight. Number one, talent is amazing, but there's no chance for Central Eastern European companies to scale any business locally. You can build world-class products, based on Central Eastern European and Polish engineering. But you cannot scale any business in Poland. You cannot scale any business
We
in the
have
region.
problems with understanding you because your microphone is working not well.
Okay. So okay, let me turn off the video. Hopefully, audio is going to get better now.
Yes.
Can you hear me better now?
Right.
Okay. So
Okay.
should I repeat my comment, or should I repeat maybe very briefly?
No, it's
so
okay.
in
Go
Poland
ahead.
and generally in Central Eastern Europe, you can build world-class solutions. You cannot scale the business. And so Central Eastern Europe and Poland, if we want to be successful, we need to follow the example of countries who were in similar situation and became successful. And the best example here is Israel. Israel has also incredibly high quality talent. And I would argue that from DNA perspective, Israeli talent is actually very close to the quality of talent we have in Central Europe. There is actually genetic connection because, like, you know, the state of Israel was built to a large extent by people who came from Poland and Central Eastern Europe. So the quality of talent is very comparable. And also, Israel has no market to speak of. No domestic technology consumption market. So they had to expand internationally from day one. And this is the problem that we have in the region. So as Intel, I was able to help companies to expand internationally. But, you know, it is a major barrier. Poland is not connected to the world. Polish companies are not connected to global markets. There are few and far between examples of companies who expanded successfully and reached any scale. And one correction, because, like, you know, some people before me mentioned about unicorns. One thing that is kind of a clear demonstration that Poland is the world champion in waste opportunity is the fact that Poland does not have a single technology unicorn. You know, let that sink in. A 40 million country in Europe does not have a single technology unicorn. And just to give you a feeling, every single neighbor of Poland has many. Czech Republic has several unicorns. Companies like Avast, Alvil. You have in Slovakia, you have Asset. In Belarus, you have Wargaming Inc. and one more, I forgot the name. In Lithuania, you have Vinted. In Ukraine, you have 4 unicorns. The most recent one being Data Robot, but also People AI. So Poland is the world champion in wasting the huge talent that we have. So basically, the situation that we are facing right now, which I'm actually, you know, I think is we shouldn't be proud, is that, you know, the fact that we have R&D centers in Poland, you know, the consequence of that is that Polish engineers are actually local for international unicorns. We don't have Polish companies with own brands and own proprietary products, you know, successfully winning the global markets. So by the way, you know, I heard some comments about collaboration with industry and collaboration with academic world. Number one, I would say there's no such thing as you know, as Polish innovative industry, Polish innovative enterprises. So there's no one to collaborate with. I'm also very critical, and you know, I apologies. Please accept my apologies. It's based on my 20-year-old observations, but actually there is very limited flow of ideas between academic and research centers and startup community in Poland. You know, it's we are lying behind, examples like MIT or Stanford or many other foreign. My observation is that actually, Polish scientists actually are still kind of, focused on publications and research, not on commercialization. We see, and this is once again my organoleptic, my kind of, vision. I have seen very, very few examples of companies that successfully from academic and research centers. And, I would say that, there's one way to encourage creation of so the bottom line, I would, you made that the final comment I have is that we are in a situation that we have amazing talent that we've been wasting, almost completely for the last 30 years. And we have to create something. And there's one way of encouraging technology entrepreneurship that worked universally, venture capital. No other effective way of supporting technology companies than and actually coming back to Israeli example, Israel was pretty much in the same situation, was actually in worse situation. Because only 30 years ago, number one export product from Israel was orange juice. Now orange juice is still important, and actually it hasn't decreased in value, but it's a small fraction of technology export from the country. And what created strong support for establishment of vibrant venture capital sector in Israel. And we often, because any country, every country in the world has strong correlation between a stage of development, size, and success of the new economy, and the size of the venture capital market. No subsidies. No banking funding. Banks loans are not a good way to support the start. We need to strengthen venture capital ecosystem in the country, and I don't think it's gonna change until we really establish strong venture capital community, which has been growing, but it's still not where it should. And I'm gonna stop here. I probably could continue much longer, but I think this is my perception of the ecosystem. And from my side, I left Intel 2.5 years ago. I established my own fund, investing in deep technology companies. Half of them have Polish, and I very much hope we will produce the first Polish technology unicorn. It proves the quality of talent. The company, I believe I can name the names. The company is called ICEYE, and it's a satellite maker. Yeah. The company established by a brilliant guy from Katowice who invented small form factor satellites. SAR standing for synthetic aperture radar. Those are satellites that address the key weakness of all other satellites. So optical satellites can only see during a day in good weather conditions when there's no clouds, which means that traditional satellites can make Earth observations only roughly 25% of time. SAR satellites can see 24/7 regardless of day, night, or weather conditions. And the company has pretty much monopoly for this market globally. It's been growing incredibly fast. We are really proud of it. And I think, it's a great example of company that is keeping its brand, that is building proprietary product, that's built unique global position in a sizable market based on technology. So let me stop here. Thank you very much.
Martin, I have to thank you for your brilliant presentation, information you delivered to us. It is exactly what we are internally feeling, and you as a great authority of and absolutely top specialist and professional. You delivered us really a confirmation of our internal feeling that it is working not good. The situation in that area of innovation is more than worse. And it is my question to you. Maybe we can discuss out of microphone what can we do, what could be done in the field of venture capitals. They are only key to develop our high-tech industry in Poland. Would you be able to contact me?
Mariusz, may I have a short question to Mr. Hejka?
More than happy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Hejka, I have, the question to you. You referred to, the Israel model. As a reference, you said we should look into the Israel model. So could you be some kind, just shortly, specify what are the key success factors and what are the certain, characteristics of that Israeli model so that we can just, let's simply say, implement in Poland? Because you said look into the Israel model, but you didn't say about, what is a specific, factors, functions, institutional connections, government, universities, business, approach to cooperation, something like that, right?
Okay, so absolutely. Regarding the Israeli model, I would just highlight maybe two factors that somehow I don't think I don't observe in Poland, but they were probably fundamental elements in Israel. So number one, there is I would say globally there is understanding that creating world-class technologies requires state support and requires subsidies. Actually, China was able to, catch up significantly with the rest of the world with a massive state-supported research projects. At the same, and U.S. is probably at this point of time one of the where basically it's mostly driven by private capital, and because of to large extent because of U.S. unique position. U.S. has the easiest access to capital. It has the largest market. The largest technology consumption market, where both enterprises and early adopters. So it's way easier to start a business in the US. It's way easier to fund the business. It's way easier to scale the business. But pretty much every other country in the world is heavily subsidizing research of and take a look at in trade negotiations with US, China can give many things, but they will not back on their program to subsidize innovations and technology entrepreneurship. They understand it's the key, and the same applies to funds. At the same time, innovations don't really, and once again, apologies to all professors present at this meeting, but true innovations, true commercial innovations, or majority of them, don't happen in academic centers. They don't happen actually also in corporations. So I would say that probably 90% of global R&D spend, that's an estimate. It's not a scientific number, but let's say 90% of global R&D budgets is being spent in universities, academic and research centers, and corporations. But 90% of innovations is being created in garages by startups. And the consequence of that is that, you know, somehow, you know, if we really want to encourage and facilitate development of new economy, startup ecosystem, if we want to create technology sector in Poland, which doesn't exist, it has to happen through startup community. And this is exactly what Israel did. Israel had a project that was called Yozma, which was basically a large project of subsidizing venture capital. And the idea was very simple. Make money available to private venture capital funds who will invest it in commercially viable, innovative technology projects. And the state was treating it not as a way to make money, but as a way to subsidize development of the ecosystem. And it worked tremendously. It made miracles. So this is number one. So the state did not want to participate in the success. The state was giving strong preferences to private capital. And I don't think this is how kind of, you know, Polish administration is thinking. And I guess, you know, that is a limiting factor. This is number two. Transfer of IP from the state to startups is in Israel. It's super easy. I think, you know, in MIT and many universities, it's also encouraged. I would say in Poland, it's pretty much limited. So actually, you know, it's not easy to transfer state-owned IP to private startup. It doesn't happen. If it happens very rarely, and it has to be it has to be kind of, you know, this road has to be much wider, and there has to be a lot of to encourage kind of young scientists if they want. It's obvious that not every scientist is going to be an entrepreneur. But, you know, there has to be super simple and easy way of transferring state IP or university IP to private companies. And finally, you know, I think the kind of like, you know, an element which also was kind of mentioned during the session today. I would say that generally, you know, it would be really great if Polish administration was more entrepreneur friendly. And once again, what I'm going to say is probably controversial, but, you know, I think that, you know, when I compare how administration treats entrepreneurs in multiple jurisdictions, I don't think Polish administration compares well. Actually, the kind of, you know, the system is very onerous, very non-transparent, and actually very, I would even use word hostile versus entrepreneurs. And I guess, and I'm not even talking about specific regulations, but I'm talking about kind of, you know, a dialogue with public administration. You know, I don't think in most countries, kind of, you know, a letter from tax office is a reason to be stressed. In Poland, it is, and it shouldn't be.
Thank you for this response. But still, you know, I mean, I rather try to avoid the wording, like you said, hostile, because you know, my experience in the business is over 25 years. I am a professor only 20 years. So the goal of our panels and the festival is to try to suggest some certain concrete, solution or advices. And if we describe, in a very general wording like a hostile, it doesn't says anything. So because, if you look into the basically last, I don't know, probably 10 years, the question is, although these problems and issues you said, did we made any progress? So the question is why we do so. The progress is not basically satisfied. Why it is not satisfied, and what means, to catch up the others. The another thing, is the question, how it is happening that in Poland you have, before the pandemic, you had just a 5% of unemployment, and in Spain, for instance, there was much more higher. In France was higher unemployment. In UK was reasonable, not low, but so this that there is some correlation, okay, between these many things. In one point I agree with you, or in 2 points. The first, Poland, from the historical reasons, was basically with a low capital, a deficit of the capital. If you analyze the assets per capita in our neighboring countries, Slovakia, Latvia, Lithuania, Hungary, the assets in different forms, the cash on deposits, stocks, properties. So the assets per capita in this neighboring country and everywhere in Europe is much more higher than in Poland. I am not going to open the very, issue, which was basically coming from the second war, that Poland was mostly destroyed. But the fact is, we have really a lack of a capital, right? And as you said, I agree as well that the tools and procedures of financing the venture capitals were with big deficiencies. That's right, and that's right. You are saying, which I agree. That the state should, transfer more funds into that, as you said, the private business for startups. But the question is, whether you are going to find the capital. If you get the pressure from the European Union that we cannot exceed, for instance, a 3% deficit, okay? So there are many constraints in that system of equations, okay, which impose some certain limits. And my point is not to argue with you, because I really appreciate your the way you just put the a diagnosis. So you diagnose that situation, but my basically speech, not only to you or just kind question or just expectation, if you can put on the paper, just on a 1 page, okay, and put the concrete advices, which are really, because again, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be tough to you, because if I ask you about, the concrete key factors in Israel system and features and the characteristics, you just responded. You just gave the 2 answers, which for me were very obvious. You said the global understanding of the Israel and the private capital or just subsidy or the capital coming from the state of Israel to these private startups. They are, for me, were just very quite obvious reasons. So I think you are, I mean, a very high top expert in that to deliver more, I mean, more basically explanations and more descriptions about how this, in more details, this Israeli system works. Remember, the global understanding and the capital of Israel is not the issue which was generated over, let's say, 20 years. So Poland is practically 20 years after the transition to the new market, I mean, a free market economy. And the Israel, you know, had over ages, you know, worldwide network, right, which, you know, delivered some certain potential and as well network of the capital. So I think that to do that network for Poland from that historical reasons which had, I mean, a kind of added value for Israel, it is impossible. So my question would be to you, but you don't need to answer now, because if we hear the Professor Juba, if we hear very nice, I mean, a speech, if we had, you know, Dr. Wierzchowiecki, and I am, you know, as well, and let's say, I'm working in some committee which we, I mean, evaluate some startups and the projects in Poland, and it seems to be that really we have very many of them. But they are, of course, after they approach some certain stage, they are purchased or bought by certain, you know, international companies or the corporations. Okay, so if we say that we have that potential of the innovations and very concrete products, then I think what only we need, if this is a true, of course, if this is a true, because you are saying about the scaling this, that it means basically that only what we need is to well organize a funding system. So my question, would you agree with that final statement?
Yeah, so a couple of quick comments. So I would say that yeah, maybe rhetorically I used the word kind of hostile, but if we take a look at various tax kind of system ratings globally, couple of things comes out. So actually, you know, Poland comes up as one of the worst countries in terms of tax system. And it comes out from OECD reports, Tax Foundation reports. Actually, you know, and it's pretty interesting. It doesn't have to be this way, and it's not really linked to any legacy, because actually Estonia is perceived as having the best tax system globally. And actually, in terms of, it's been OECD, for example, estimates the number of hours an entrepreneur needs to spend on filing and dealing with administration per annum. Estonian entrepreneur needs to spend only 10% of the time on dealing with bureaucracy and filings versus Polish entrepreneur. So significant percentage of time and effort is wasted. So yeah, maybe I wouldn't call it, and it's as mentioned. I look at the rate at the ranking for 2019. Out of 49 countries, Poland is ranked as the second to the last, as in terms of, like, you know, tax system. So it is a problem. In terms of availability of capital, actually, Poland has slipped. Poland was way ahead only 20, 30 years ago in terms of GDP per capita, for example. Poland was ahead of Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Slovakia, not even mentioning, other countries. Actually, all those countries I mentioned, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Slovakia.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I need to interrupt. I was not talking about the GDP per capita. I was talking about the real assets available by the household per capita. This is a very big difference, and it has nothing to do.
Long term, they need to be linked. But to summarize, but I agree it's different. So to summarize, to come to conclusion, I think that what I said is that there is no better way to fund early stage technology companies than venture capital. There is, in every country on the planet, very strong correlation between available VC funding and the contribution and the size of the new economy and its contribution to employment, GDP, exports. And this venture capital sector in Poland is highly underdeveloped. And Israel, that was in similar situation only 30 years ago, of course, in terms of being connected globally. Israel has tremendous advantage, but in terms of ability to create companies that expand internationally, once again, I think a lot of other countries, Estonia is probably the only country globally that has more technology startups per capita than in Israel. And in terms of global technology successes, even countries like Ukraine, Belarus, and Romania, which have no advantage, no historical advantage over Poland in any way, but actually they were able to produce it. Romania actually had is a very interesting story, because Romania, in order to keep talent locally, they introduced 0% personal income tax for software engineers, and they were able to defend it, and they are keeping it still even as EU member, which in relatively short time grew the contribution of technology sector to GDP from 3% to double digits. So even countries that had weaker starting point than Poland made more progress.
Marcin, thank you very much. It was extremely informative for us. We stay in touch, and I see at the bottom give the sign Professor Jan Dziuban. Please, Janek, ask your question.
Yes, I spent several years as a CEO of two high-risk companies at the beginning of the 90s, when I promoted the industry, microelectronic and microsystem industry at that time, producing very, well-developed instrumentation. So I understand very well the procedure of transfer of the knowledge from university to the company. I know very well the administrative regulations, even more complicated today than it was some years ago. After that, I spent several years being an active professor and an engineer for the French Republic. And to my best knowledge, some negatives existing in Poland as well as in France are common to that part of the world, to that culture of the transfer of the knowledge and feedback between universities and the industry. So the very difficult transfer is not only the Polish case, and examples given on the, say, state of an art in Israel or in Estonia are not completely fitting to the reality of the large or medium-sized states of the European community. Israel is a special case and cannot be even discussed because nobody will risk to organize the state in that frame, which is natural for a country which is surrounded by enemies and must protect first the country. And what's more, they have almost open access to the American access markets, and money coming from USA support that state. Of course, they are smart. They do plenty of the high technological products, mainly for military and agriculture. And what is the situation in Poland? I have plenty of the industrial project. This is industry coming to me as a professor saying, Professor, can you solve our problem? I do analyze and I say yes or not. If I may, we do the feedback, we do the common groups, we discuss the problem from details, and we create common group for solving of that problem. Money is coming easily. The problem is that usually scientists, they want to be scientists. Bankers, they deal with money. Venture capital is looking for fast money, as fast as possible, as easy as possible. And the industry is an industry. Sometimes it's lazy, sometimes it's not modern, sometimes leads from different donations or circumstances coming from the back. Looking onto the organization of the supporting of high technological transfer from the university to the industry in Poland, I see plenty of obstacles, and I completely agree with the voices during the discussions. Yes, it is untransferable. This is very complicated. There are plenty of different officials making bad decisions. There are surpassing each to our influences from Ministry of Education, through Ministry of Science, from the Center of Research, from the Agency of Development of Industry. Mix. How to solve the problem? The first is actions of professors. If professor has something, should be acted in transfer. Professors do not want it. They want grants. They want habilitations, dissertations, professorships, visiting, conferences. They even say that we cannot measure a science ethics, scientific ethics, as science itself, by measuring of the industrial ethics. No, science is a self-governing part of the high society, and we have our own measurements for measuring of our activity. Number of publications, different factors, etc., etc., etc. The main problem in the last maybe even 15 years in Polish science, continuous problem is that we have too much of the material science-oriented, very sophisticated and very expensive actions, giving nothing to the society. Dissertation, habilitation, and of course the pleasure of giving of a good lecture at the international conference, grouping scientists from very, very rich countries, which really consume some basic ethics generated in Poland in that kind of activity. Nobody from the science wants to understand industry because there is no feedback. My career as a professor does not depend and never been depending on the industrialization of my head and my knowledge. Without changing of that, the base, nobody will transfer knowledge toward industry. Money is too easy. Even today, money is too easy. That's simple.
Yannick, thank
Marius,
you very much. Thank you very much for your remarks. I would like to now to ask Mr. Konrad Banecki, and after then we open the discussion. We have really an avalanche of questions. Mr. Banecki, dear Konrad, the floor is yours.
Microphone. Please switch on the microphone.
Panie Konradzie, proszę włączyć mikrofon. Pana mikrofon proszę włączyć.
Teraz słychać? Halo? Czy teraz słychać?
Tak, teraz słychać.
Teraz słychać. Okay, I repeat, I thank you very much for the invitation, for so fascinating panel and possibilities to meet with academic people, professors, professionalists. I try, okay, to answer for the question how we can meet in Poland industry and high technology. What we can do for this. I think the question of how to implement innovation, high-tech technologies into Polish industry effectively is a wrong question. Polish companies are implementing the latest technologies very efficiently and effectively. We have a well-educated society, many young higher education graduates in the labor market, proper preparation for such program, as well as motivation and willingness to participate in the modern project. The Polish banking sector is an excellent example of an industry that is often technological ahead of the foreign competitors. The main problem we should now focus on is how to participate in the creation of these innovative high technologies, also referred to as high-tech or global innovation in our industry. It is not enough to simply implement the existing technology. It is important to be able to fully understand its background, support, and to help develop it. This approach gives us a chance to gain a competitive advance and thus prospects for development and strengthening the position of enterprises and as a consequences, the economy of Poland and our macroeconomic position. We are all being constantly amazed by the accelerating pace of technological changes. Whether it is enterprise, household, or an individual, we are all affected by it. Expensive technological innovation we all use on daily basis in sectors like multimedia technology or automotive industry, or being changed in the moment we start to use them, and new generation models appear almost the next day. Due Due to these rapid technological changes, as in national and state, we must think about how to be a participant in this marathon and not just a passive observer, user and consumer. The Polish Economic Society gather Polish companies from the SME sectors, but also strong, large private companies, which gives us the opportunity to learn about various needs, problems, and possibilities of development. I'm trying to think of an economic model that could resist the impact of epidemics and pandemics. Now, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we have to research economic doctrines and development models that seems to be inviolable. And I think that Poland is capable of creating a high-tech industry sector that would generate large revenue for the country and would radically reduce unemployment. Reading the articles published in trade and scientific magazines, we can see our country as a country where the share of industrial production in the national income, and especially in the high-tech sector, has decreased over the last few decades. In turn, the Ministry of Science and Higher Education Bulletin present a different picture, in which research and development expenditure has increased significantly. A powerful system of support of scientific research and implementation of research results has been created, and Polish scientists receive a number of hours abroad. Also, they may seem contradictory. Both statements are generally true. Research and development expenditure in Poland increased in last year. We have created a complex system of support of scientific research and commercialization of its results. Polish scientists gain international recognition and awards for their innovation and innovation technology contribution. But at the same time, Polish high technology industry is still decreasing, or at most, it develops very slowly instead of growing rapidly. There are many reasons for the paradoxical situation. Theoretically, the main goal of innovation support program is to support domestic companies, especially small and medium ones. In effect, however, such companies receive small funding for their own research and implementation. According to the data of the Enterprise Development Program for the year 2020, carried out Ministry of Economy, the structure of current expedition of the operational program Innovating Economy is as follows: capital investment 38%, R&D 11%, business environment institution 40%. This figure gives the following pictures. Only 11% was spent on research and development that could lead to the development of our own technologies. But as much as 38% was spent on so-called capital investment to support the purchase of new technologies, machinery, labor equipment, almost always of foreign origin. This way, the vast majority of financial resources supports foreign economies, and in a few years, due to rapid technological changes, it will be necessary to allocate more funds to new solutions again. The document does not specify where the other half of the funds for business environment institutions was allocated. It can be assumed that they were spent for training, consulting, marketing, advertising, bank sector, and various innovation support organizations like Business Angels Network, etc., etc. These are corporations, especially the international ones. They have become the main beneficiaries for support programs, as they have teams specializing in applying for such programs. SMEs without such resources have an unequal chance applying for these funds.